Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Killian MacDonald. I'm currently doing my graduate research around generative AI and multimedia fantasy world building. So really excited to have this conversation with the both of you as filmmakers on kind of what does this all mean for the indie film industry. Instead of boringly reading your bios, do you guys want to just give a quick introduction?
I'll go first. Hi everyone, thanks for coming. I'm HaZ from HaZmation, so you guys know the company. We produce animated feature films, episodic TV series, and video games, all original IP. And we've just finished an animated feature film which was all done in Unreal Engine, Unreal Pixels, and that's going to come out on one of the streaming services at the end of the year. My background came from live action. I've done 2 movies that were on Netflix and a Disney show called Castlane on Disney Plus. So that's me.
We've just had this battle backstage. You forgot to mention the main event. Where did you come from?
Oh, video games. That was my background. Yes.
I did 8 years in Codemasters making racing games, and we both worked at Codemasters, which we just found out. So I'm Alec Harvey. I make VR. I like to say I make VR more than I make film, but I basically got a team of 20 people who make VR training, who like services all over the world, and we make products. And the mic's not moving over. We make products for training, and that's sort of led us to where we are now. And now we're making VR films and stuff. The latest projects with the Royal Ballet. So we're looking to incorporate 3D 180 video with objects that are photogrammetry scanned and real-world stage environments, and then produce it as a WebXR or VR download for people to experience a step-inside version of the Royal Ballet.
Fabulous, thank you. All right, so a few quick rapid-fire questions to get us going here. Can you just give us one sentence max explaining the favorite part of your job?
I guess it's creative problem solving.
I just love capturing things, whether it's photos or videos.
Yeah. What was the first time you used a generative AI tool?
Mine was probably ChatGPT, but also a video app which I just sometimes load in YouTube videos to, and it spits out loads of different, like 30 reels from one 45-minute clip, which blew my mind.
I think for me, like, the obvious thing was Mid-Journey, and that was just pure curiosity.
Yeah. Love that. And the strangest, weirdest generative AI output you've gotten to date?
I don't know about myself, but I met someone on the way in who showed me that when they were doing the card for our piece here, they had the top of my head missing, so they asked replace head, but it replaced the whole of my head with a different person's face. So that was...
That's a good one.
I filmed her telling me about it. It was interesting. It was the graphic designer that did these for the show.
I mean, everything that I tend to put into the journey is strange and weird. I think I've got to work on my text prompts, seriously. But I think that's the point, right? It's, if you're using it to explore, and, all artists are creative explorers. The reason I love doing what I do in terms of storytelling is finding an angle of storytelling, right? Finding the nuances in the storytelling. And sometimes in your journey, you put a bunch of text prompts, which usually for me is what I'm feeling about something. And I feed that in, I'm like, oh, that's not what I was thinking. But it then triggers other ideas for me. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I kind of would love to just start with getting an idea of what's going on in the film, VR, gaming industry as a whole, generative AI. And so we've heard a lot this morning about different industries and the applications. What are sort of the key generative AI moments you're seeing in indie film?
I was just going to say something we mentioned a minute ago about the sort of process and the speed at which we can create scenes and immersive experiences these days has just gone massively super fast from really recent. I was just in San Fran for the Apple launch. We've seen that new headset launch, and that has just completely opened my mind to the things that I want to do, like we just mentioned, about having immersive experiences that actually come out at you from the real world. That's fine, you're going to be there after being disappointed with HoloLens and other AR headsets, magically. But one of the things is retopology, 3D objects, which is a massive part of my world and HaZ's world for VFX. The ability to scan this roof with my phone now and stick it into the cloud, I use Polycam, I can have that re-topo and get me a game-ready asset probably in about 15 minutes. And the fact that a year ago, 2 years ago, I was employing artists to retopologize and decimate the polygons in these models, it was a massive bottleneck for me. So I think NVIDIA just released something else, which is film this room with video, upload it, have a 3D scene from the video. Like, it's going to be as crazy as that. So the democratization of that, for me, is the biggest bit at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, you know, concepting, ideation, all of that stuff is the obvious one. But in terms of production, you know, there's loads of menial tasks like, you know, if we reference visual effects, rotoscoping. You know, I started my career, you know, after leaving video games, I went to work for a place called MPC. And one of the first entry jobs you do is a roto artist. Worked on a movie called 10,000 BC. You guys remember that movie? Roland Emmerich film. And I was just spending hours just cutting out these grass blades and things, only for the CG artist to slap a big mammoth on top of the whole thing. So, you know, I'm seeing Nuke, you know, the Foundry Nuke's software, and they use machine learning and AI to, you know, analyze the video and to pretty much auto-roto. And I'm like, oh my god, I really wish I had that. So that speeds things up and allows me to focus on compositing and focus on the shot as opposed to the menial task.
Yeah. And so with kind of all that in mind, either projects you've worked on or that you've seen others do, what are some of the more notable success stories of generative AI in filmmaking? Or things in process that we shall be following?
I was going to say that following on from the Retopo thing, the fact that a lot of the Mandalorian series has 3D objects in the background that have been probably created in that way is really big for me. But we're seeing the same thing happen with historical places as well. That's my big push at the moment. National Trust and English Heritage sites, they have massive historical collections in old buildings. So we go round to those buildings and work with them to scan their collections, and now we're just helping one of them, the church in Warwick, sell their, I call them inanimate objects, but we shouldn't say that because it's a tomb. So we scanned the tomb and then made money from the tomb for the church. So we're doing that with lots of different places. So we can open it up to show them how to scan their collections and own them themselves.
Yeah, and Alex, I think on that point, you know, as people say, oh, is this going to take everyone's jobs and all the other questions we've been playing this morning, but that real world implication of using the real sites to kind of then create something new or as you've been talking about the inspiration. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, talking about the real sites is interesting that you mentioned that, because in the future I do see a time when the real sites are like an encyclopedia. So I can walk around here and look at these pillars, and these pillars can pop out with information about tobacco docks and what it used to be in this room, or even this room now can have bits about everyone's bio above their heads if they wanted to have that. I see a point in the future, yes, when the real world is just like a canvas for an encyclopedia in Carter. Remember those?
Oh, yeah.
In Carter with a CD and looking up different things around the world.
That's how old we are, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so the real world is a canvas. I think that would be good.
Yeah, I love that idea. And so kind of in the nitty-gritty of the technical creation process, where do you really see generative AI helping to create unique, original content that stands out in what we know is becoming an even more crowded landscape?
Well, I mean, it's interesting using the word unique and original, and don't hate me, but like, if we understand how Midjourney works, currently, you know, it is sourcing from other people's artwork, right? Now, you know, there are the John Connors of AI out there that are saying it's theft, it's stealing. I wouldn't necessarily say it's stealing, but, you know, it doesn't necessarily mean you're making something original and unique. But at the flip side, what is original and unique? Because every single idea comes from a subconscious of us being inspired by something, right? You know, like I've just done an action movie. Clearly, when you see the trailer, I've watched a lot of John Woo movies, clearly, or John Wick. So, but I think, you know, it does allow us to experiment with ideas. Like, you know, with a lot of filmmakers here would probably know this, but, you know, pitching is yeah, it's a tedious process, right? You know, like when you're a producer and a director, you have like 10 projects or more sometimes, and you're constantly pitching. Sometimes it's a one-page outline, sometimes it's a pitch deck with some imagery, sometimes it's a page with certain cast members as, hey, wouldn't they be great in this movie? And you're talking to agents and managers and talent agents, financiers and studio heads. And I find generative AI can be very useful to kind of cut a lot of those meetings. So instead of having 6 meetings about this project, you can probably cut it down to like 1 or 2, because there's stuff to look at, you're communicating ideas, and it's never going to be the final thing, and that's the point, and that's where I find generative AI helping massively for the filmmaking process, is getting the conversation going, and which is usually how projects start in the first place.
Yeah, and I guess, oh sorry, Alex, do you want to add to that?
No, I was just going to say, I totally agree. That as you walked in, I was feeding into chat what I'm doing today to write an article about today when I get home. So constantly using it. And for our project, I literally feed the staff, the shoots, the locations to chat, and then they can ask chat questions. Like they can, as their same instance of chat, and ask a question like, do you remember the old school databases? It's just like that. It's like feeding in Microsoft Access, I think it was called.
Access, yeah.
It's like feeding a database that I can just feed it my own stuff. I think it's amazing. One more thing about that, my directors always used to go mad because I'm really rubbish with words on social media. So now I use chat for my posts online sometimes. They're all moaning at me saying we preferred the version of Alex that was a bit more like, can't really speak properly. So I've got to revert back from chat. I need to make it more Alex, more crap. Yeah.
I love that, because and I think that's the storytellers, we all know there's all that technical and flowy prose, but people want the real thing of kind of how we live each day, and I think AI is interesting to help us balance that. But so, and to kind of go off of that point of those admin tasks or these things outside of the actual creative process that you have to do as a filmmaker, a business owner, a creative, how do you sort of balance, as I think it's really exciting, if you're a young filmmaker or an emerging creative, to say, okay, there are now these tools that I don't necessarily need to know somebody else to form a team to start getting this idea out there. But then where does the balance become between that power of empowering the individual, but also there's a lot of good in collaboration?
Yeah, I mean, I have to say filmmaking is collaboration. Like, yes, I mean, as a director, my job is to lead the herd and to inspire my team to get to that North Star, as we call it, but it wouldn't be possible without the collaboration. And let's just remember that we have all this amazing technology and we have all these amazing processes, but without us, people, it means nothing. So, but let's not forget though that technology empowers people, as we were talking about, and if I have things like Midjourney and ChatGPT and all these other tools to help empower my artists and my collaborators to help communicate, to try to get as close to that North Star vision of the movie, then it's going to be great. But I don't think it's going to be replacing teams, because that's not the point of filmmaking. Yeah.
I want to have people that really embrace it. I want to employ new staff, that someone that comes to me and says, I've got 20 AI chats that I'm training on different scripts over here, and I've got this thing over here that I'm doing. I want to employ that person. Someone said to me the other day in the office, they had to go through 130 CVs for one video editor job. And I said, use chat. And they were like, what? So I just showed them on my phone, copy, paste, copy, paste, copy, paste. And then we copied the video editor job spec into that and said, give me the top 10 that live nearest to me that can drive, that match that spec. Don't read CVs for 3 days, just give it to chat to do. It's a bit of copy and paste to do, but it's really quick for certain things that you don't need to go through.
But that's the process for selecting the candidates to interview, right? That's not them getting a job based on that. No. Okay.
No, that is, I want to see that, I want to whittle down 130 to 10.
That's good, yeah.
Makes sense.
Right, and I think this is too, where it's all about knowing then what that model is trained on, and with ChatGPT, we've had a lot of those things about the unconscious bias and the pieces it works for, and I think, talking about kind of hiring, what would you say to sort of young indie filmmakers who are kind of really interested in embracing and playing with AI, but, you know, we're a room of people who've mostly bought in, but a lot of people haven't. And so sort of that fear of starting their career really tied to generative AI and what sort of brand around it. Would you be concerned? How do you sort of handle that?
In terms of what you mean, like anyone coming out of film school?
Yeah, like I think if you're coming out of film school and you have things in your portfolio that didn't have generative AI, that you're kind of pitching and trying to get support on those projects, but you know, if you Google you're starting to connect you with generative AI, is that something that could really hurt potentially what studios might pick you up or places you might be able to show your films?
I mean, it's a...
I was going to say I would definitely use it if I was. Yeah, I wouldn't not use it. It's just it's like a very new term that's here, that's very fast at growing. So it's like an exponential new version of VR or drones. It's just going to be really fast. So I guess it's getting used to it a bit. Yeah, people should use it. I think you should use it and understand it. But maybe if you're trying to get something seen by someone, don't have that a chat sentence as the first thing, like my posts online that are really obvious, not me. Maybe just have an actual sentence from you. Just film your face.
That's actually a really good point. I mean, going on your social media post analogy you just came up with, because at the end of the day, like I remember speaking to my managers in LA, and I'm like, why did I get the gig to direct a kids show when my last 2 movies were friggin' dark? And this is Disney Channel, not Disney Marvel. And they go, because you were hired based on your personality, based on you, what you bring to the set, what you bring to collaborate with actors. I don't think AI can replace that, which is probably why they were asking you to change it back, because they want to see the real Alex, right? And that's the thing, you know, when you work in film and TV, a lot of it's personalities, it's a lot of it, you know, the jobs that directors inspire, but also, you know, you've got to be someone that's approachable as well. I don't think AI can do it, but at the same time, AI can help you speed up certain processes to allow you to be more resilient.
For sure. And so you've both worked across kind of that more, the 2D film sort of things, gamings, and are now in that 3D virtual world space. What do you sort of, as we think about, you know, I think historically we've always sort of thought of storytelling as you create for this form in mind, and that's changing. Are there things with generative AI that you do differently as you switch forms?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
I think it's still stories, and for me, scanning the real world and capturing people's stories, still the same. It's just going to speed up stuff in the background. I don't see it replacing me or HaZ walking around, filming, directing, talking to people. That's still going to be a thing. It's, for me, at that level, we still need to go out and capture the stories and film stuff. At the moment.
At the moment. I mean, you hit the nail there, man. It's storytelling, isn't it? Like, you know, that's never going to change. You know, we've been telling stories since the dawn of cavemen, right? Cavemen and women. And that doesn't change. You know, we were drawing stuff in cave walls, and then, you know, scriptures and so on. And even if you know, look at all the religious books like the Bibles, the Quran, and so on, they're all kind of religious stories. So we're always storytelling, you know, in our gut. But at the end of the day, you know, how do you facilitate that storytelling? You know, some people use live action, some use the stop motion. You know, stop motion's amazing. Like, some people use CGI. You know, some people just use audio, like radio, right? Like Awesome Worlds, right? So, and I see Gen AI as being this next thing now. Like, you know, that could be another way to tell stories. But the story is always going to come from the human heart, I think.
I think all of those bits, they're all formats. I totally agree, from cave paintings on the wall through to modern day now, the TVs and video. I feel like there's always been that suspension of disbelief there. This is where I'm going to push VR on it, because the suspension of disbelief can now be gotten rid of completely. You haven't got to listen to a radio and think about what someone's talking on the radio, or watch the phone and imagine what it's like to be there. You now just put a VR headset on and you're actually there. Like, I've been banging this drum for 5 years. There is nowhere else to go after VR. It's the last medium. So as soon as I can give you a view of your seat where you are now, then we've just done it. So for me, it's always about that, finding the last medium, which I think is VR and AR, and that new Apple headset is mind-blowing.
Yeah, I guess to go on that, I think, what do you kind of see, if that is sort of the last medium, on the democratization of really making sure kind of the everyday consumer can get access to that. I mean, what timeline do you think we're looking at? I mean, we know that price tag on that Apple is high.
Yeah, and as people look at their watches now, they've probably got an iPhone, mine's a Fitbit, it lasts longer, the battery. But if you look at your watch, there'll be different models of watch. Eventually there'll be different models of headset, and they'll eventually just be the same form factor of these glasses. They're just coming at it from both ends. They've got to make the form factor of the tech smaller first, so they're just making the best they can do with an all-in-one headset first. And to do that, they just made their own technology. Just made different screens and different lenses, things that other people can't do. It's really cool.
It's so cool. So, and then I guess, I would love to just take a minute to talk about the Writers Guild of America and their current strike, around especially the AI components of working with streaming platforms and kind of some of the concerns there. HaZ, do you want to touch on that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously that's quite close to home for me. Yeah, I mean, look, it's interesting, like, rightly so, writers are concerned, just like other artists are concerned, because obviously writing is a craft which takes years and years and years to perfect. Like, anyone could be a writer, but not anyone can be a seasoned writer that when you read that script, it's a freaking page turner. I get sent tons of scripts, and I hate reading scripts because like they're 100+ pages. I'm like, oh my god. But then once in a while you get this script, and you're like, oh my god, I'm just flipping pages. The way it's laid out, the way that each description is so succinct to the point, where the characters' dialogue feels so relatable. I don't think an AI could replicate that right now, so I don't think writers can be worried. But in terms of WGA, I think obviously the problem is there is no legal, there's no law at the moment that could protect. I mean, they're talking about it in the US, obviously, it's going through all the usual thing, the legal forums, but there isn't anything at the moment where a studio gets a script from an AI-generated script software and an actual writer. The only way you're going to be able to difference if you've got an Aaron Sorkin script and you've got an AI script, you'll instantly tell the difference. Or you get a Tarantino script, which you can all imagine what that's going to read like, and then you get, an AI. So I think, again, that's why I come down to that whole personality thing, and so, but it is a concern because a lot of lower budget studios, the studios that churn out these movies and put them on Amazon, they're like, really cheap horror films, which are cool. There's a market, Asylum, Sharknado, and so on. Their whole business model is churning content out, and they will overlook the ethics of the script. Like, oh my god, this script's done in 2 weeks. Bam, we can shoot this like in a month, and that will become very apparent. I think everyone's going to know, oh, that just doesn't have any soul in that film.
And what guidance would you give to indie filmmakers who are trying to, promote their work on social media and other places, but also want to protect it from that data collection?
I mean, it's tough. I mean, one of the early panels I heard today, which is great, was the whole art station, Netflix art station, where everyone's putting like, no AI, my image shall not have no AI. But that's more of a revolutionary approach online. I think a lot of this stuff is going to be kind of like designed and protected by the people, I think. And then the lawyers will come in and set up a division, and then a law division of CAA or something, and say, oh, we now protect, artists, and you're going to pay them an extra premium as an actor or a writer. But at the moment, there is no. It's a very fine line at the moment. It's a very grey area. It's very experimental.
My work doesn't touch on it too much from the video point of view, but from a 3D model point of view and licensing and copyright and things like that, it really does touch on it. But there's a quick story that I've been using Polycam for the last 6 months, probably longer, but for scanning on my mobile phone. Download Polycam, I don't own the app, so I'm not marketing it. But I've been downloaded and I've scanned 600 objects on my phone, and I've uploaded them to Sketchfab, and they sell 3 or 4 times a week. Different models sell of things for like £10. So people are buying them for VFX or 3D worlds, but they're buying random objects like my dinner. So it's like Instagram, it's like a steak scanned with a nice little bottom on it, and they scan it and put it into their worlds. Randomly, a dead pigeon sold 5 times last week. So I'm just saying that it's really grey area in this world, but it's also a grey area for 3D modelling and copyright. Warwick Castle. I went to Warwick Castle and went in and scanned their trebuchet with my phone, put it online for $100, and they rang me, and now I'm working with them. So we're doing stuff with them now, but it's a really good way to like poke the bear. If you want to go to a museum, I went and did Andy Warhol recently in Germany, and it really does get a few people wound up.
Only in the UK now. If you did that in the US, you're going to get sued.
Maybe, and France, you know, like in France.
And the American's like, wait, you can get away with that? And then kind of last question for Alex. I know you have a lot of sort of government, corporate clients that you're doing the VI storytelling
Maybe I
for.
shouldn't say all these things.
How does that really, I mean, are you finding it's still like a big sell and kind of helping them understand the value of VR and AI, or that a lot of your clients are already bought in?
No, we've been working with DSTA on the Home Office, making their crime scene investigation scenes for the last 5 years, and they did not know anything about it. Yeah, they use industry to get to the cutting edge and find out what are the most up-to-date scenes they can make. Yeah, it's amazing the stuff that they do now. We've just blown up a car for a counter-terrorism training scene with DSTL, and we recreate the whole thing in virtual reality, so you can go around and investigate how this explosion happened. So, yeah, photorealistic VR is my thing. I don't like cartoon VR, sorry.
Grady's coming in. I think we're wrapping up.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I'd love to open it up for Q&A from the audience. Are there any questions? Okay. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Phil. I work in a production factory up in Manchester, London-based as well. I've got a question. So currently I'm the only creative in my company, everything else being freelance. So I've kind of been working all this out on my own, kind of tooling different AI tools together to make one piece of content, having to run it across what would be other roles in the department: art direction, script writers, creatives, video editor, which is my current role, and then in post. I'm curious, I imagine how it would work if I had a full team. These different tools would be being picked up by different members of the team, worked kind of in an assembly line kind of way. Have you had any experience with that yet? Being implemented into full teams, one process?
Definitely not for me. A lot of my team are quite against it. They don't like to use the tools that much, so I have to quite often go in and show them a little something, not show them the whole thing. For me, it's pretty far behind in the studio world, but using bits of AI. My guys are not actually doing that much. It's probably more me and a few people around me looking at it.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, I don't think you can use AI to replace like animators and stuff. I mean, yes, we have things like Move AI, which is where you can film someone moving, and then the AI will generate motion capture data, performance, and that. So that saves you from getting animated and so on. But then, if the motion for that just feels a little uncanny valley, because it's like the thing about animation is it's hyper realistic, but that's what makes animation what it is. But at the moment, I think the only part of the process that you could try as being like a one person to try and do rather than is like the concepting. Doing that concept art, and once you've got the concept art to a point that you feel like, oh yeah, I like a bit of this, I like the colors of this, then you bring the artist on, say, look, here's what's in my head that I've fed through, now go and create this concept art. So it speeds up the process. Instead of hiring a concept artist for like 2 weeks, you'd probably just hire him for like 3 days, because a lot of the time it's a lot of back and forth, right, to get that right concept art. So that's the only place I can see it. And obviously, automating some of the post-process, the post-production process helps as well, like I was mentioning Roto. And also things like color grading as well. But even color grading, you hire a good colorist, it's the intuition of getting that look. When you see a movie, you're like, that looks like a movie, and you see a low budget film, it doesn't look like a movie. A lot of it is the color. But if you could train the AI model to reflect certain colors to look, then obviously we have LUTs, obviously, but like a bit further than that.
And I have a question, which is, if you look at films, they will often follow the hero's journey. A lot of them will have the same sort of arc. It's quite predictable. And then if you look at a game, you'll have multiple characters, backstories, and series like Lost. I don't know how they created those scripts, but it seemed every week like they were just, going back to the drawing board and creating new backstories. How do you see a future where stories become less linear and more sort of divergent, going in different different directions, and then using data to then say, okay, well, these characters we're going to keep on board, and these characters we're going to kill off.
Well,
essentially.
I mean, of course, we have things like we have branch narrative already, right? I mean, video games in itself is branch narrative. You know, like going back to playing games like Zelda, right, on my Game Boy when I was like, I don't know, like 8 or something, right? And I was playing that, and I really believed the person I was speaking to buy this potion is a real person, right? And that kind of fooled me as a kid. Now you look at bigger games like Call of Duty and so on. Even though Call of Duty is very linear, there is a branch narrative because if you get killed or you kill a certain person. So I think that, and if you look at Bandersnatch, we look at live action, right? So video games is one thing, that's always been kind of multi-branch. You know, when you design a game, you don't write a script, right? The script is a dialogue, it's a flow chart when you're making a game. When you're making a movie, it's very linear in terms of it's a 90-page script or 100-page script, right? Or it's a TV show, 40 pages per episode with a pilot and so on. But you could potentially create a data set model, like if you're doing Lost today, they could probably feed all that in and say, you know, how do we reveal, what that polar bear is, for example, for those who haven't seen it, spoiler alert. But there could be ways, but again, like I've been saying for like the start of this, you still need a writer's room, you still need a writer. But it's fun as well. We always have conversations in the writer's room like, what if we did kill this character? Or what if this character didn't fall in love or get the girl or the guy? You probably do a journey version of that and feed that in, or maybe chat. Probably do that, ChatGPT, and see what the outcome is, just for shits and giggles,
My version of that is I want to be able to be in the story. So for me, it wouldn't be multiple characters like games are. It would be, imagine you're watching Mandalorian, now try and imagine me watching on an aeroplane in a headset, which I do on long haul flights. You watch a Mandalorian on a 2D screen in front of me, massive screen, but I've got chairs around me, which is better than an aeroplane around me. And as I'm watching it, I want the film to stop as the spaceship's flying into Endor or whatever. I want to stop and I want to fly that ship in, I want to land it, then I want the story to carry on. I want that for every Netflix brand, to have a little bit of immersion. It's like a step not quite into a full-on 360 film. It's just carry on with the film, give me the narrative, split it into 4 pieces and have 4 interactive bits where you control the something. That's my side of it.
Can I just add to that really fast? I mean, I think too, a lot of it will end up about genre. I think there's so much exciting happening kind of multimedia and working across form, but then you still have your genres like your romance, your rom-com, where that happy ending is promised, right? And the consumer's sort of counting on it. And so making sure to sort of keep that, but there's also really exciting things happening with just kind of new writers who are putting lists of tropes from romance novels kind of into ChatGPT and saying like, okay, what is a fun twist I can put on this, and kind of helping them break out of that early in their careers.
And any other questions? Okay, we do have one. I'll just ask my one, selfishly. So when it comes to biopics and biographies, a lot of biopics are around celebrities, politicians, but ordinary people also have very interesting lives. Is there a potential where you could go to your grandparents, ask them for their stories, find an image of them from their younger days, and create a story for them and show, allow them to relive their past?
Yeah, I think there's two parts to that, isn't there? There's one, the facts. You'll definitely get all the facts in there. Like if your grandmother or father is saying, oh, I was in World War II and I lived in Austria, then you could feed all that into AI to get all the historical data online. But the thing about those kind of stories, if anyone was related to Anne Frank and knew what she was like, the story wouldn't be about the fact. It would be more about what it was like being in the war. And I don't think you can get that from a data set, but you can get factual historical moments, and that will help you get a good structure. But then you have to put that soul in, and that's where the human comes in.
Fantastic.
I think as well, that tech's going to be there soon for you to just be able to do that from video, from 2D video of grandparents and parents and reels of that, fed into a 3D model of that person, fed into, my grandpa wrote a biography of his life, feed that into his 3D model and just get his model to talk back to me in VR like he's sat next to me.
Yeah, and there's to kind of go to how do you put that soul in, I think there's an artist who has a grant from the University of Edinburgh right now who has all the journals of her father, who was a sailor, who's kind of putting them into her own code to really see what is his own story about the sea, and sort of reconnect with him. So I think there is some of that can come too.
Fantastic. We've got one last question.
Andrew Ebel, Optimist TV. You touched on rights during your fantastic speech. A couple of things. Obviously, copying an existing copyright work is an infringement. But in February, the US Copyright Office held that something created by Midjourney was not protected by copyright. Obviously, the discussion is carrying on with creatives and those in the industry and lawmakers to make sure that the law catches up. What are your views on the right way to proceed?
Wow. I think right now, I don't think there is a right or wrong way. I think it's down to ethics. It's ethically, right? Like we all know, like how Midjourney works. Like I said earlier, it's sourcing imagery. Now, ethically, it's kind of theft because you're taking someone else's artwork and you're doing a remix of it and saying, "Hey, that's my work." But then on the non-ethical side, the creative side, you go, "That's cool." Right, so I think there's going to be I think though you have to draw the line. If you're going to do something like that, you can't monetize it. Yeah, but if you are going to do that and you start to monetize it, then it starts getting towards legal territory, and not just legal, but also ethically as well. Because like if you had created this amazing piece of watercolor painting and I typed in your name watercolor painting style, but with a robot cat, you're going to instantly recognize your watercolor. And I've just made like, I don't know, $500,000 or something, you know, at Christie's or something. And you'd be like, yeah, that took ages to do that watercolor, and now he's made. So that's where the laws are going to start being written. And it's not going to happen like today, but no doubt every agency in Los Angeles, or like the WGA, the unions, the DJ, the Directors Guild, but also the agents like the CAA, WMEs, they're all looking into this, not only to protect their clients, but also like to kind of set a standard, because they're essentially the ones ruling Hollywood, right?
Thank you very much.
Sorry, can I just make an analogue point?
Please
to take
do.
that back before AI. So, sorry, to make an analogue point to take that back before AI. If a Getty photographer photographs a building and puts it on Getty, when the photograph is sold, the architect doesn't get a commission. So just to take
That's a very good point.
AI out,
Very good point.
it's worth considering.
The same as if I went out into the street.
Into a public space and took a 3D model. So went out to public space, took a photo. I could put that photo on Shutterstock for sale. If I take 150 photos of a lion in Trafalgar Square, it's also a public space, and I can also sell it online. That is, in the UK, one of the laws I have looked into. In a public space, you can monetize something in the free space. There is a whole world of pain. But what about, I think, blockchain for film and images, and forget about NFTs, maybe just blockchain it. Blockchain as a technology is really good technology to be able to validate the fact that you own that chair.
Smart contract.
Yeah.
Well, you own a copy of the chair.
Yeah.
You own the design of the chair.
No, unless you design the chair.
Just a real quick for you, really good point, totally agree. But one thing, when I'm making movies and I say if I shoot right there, right, and I send my film to like Netflix for distribution, I have to give a bunch of release forms. And if someone, a good distributor, high profile, goes, "Oh, that's a cool shot of the tobacco docks there, do you have permission?" And I'm like, "No, we just kind of guerrilled it because it's just there." They're not going to pick up your film because you need permission for tobacco docks. It's okay for that movie to be in a commercial entity, which is a feature film. So there is that as well.
Fantastic. Round of applause. So we now move on to another industry, the music industry. Can I please invite onto the stage Samantha Talbot and okay.
How much you should